Hello, welcome. Today I'll be talking about science and symbol, which I'm using in a very specific way. So I'm talking about two categories that contain everything. So, in the way that people use the words good and evil, for example, as general containers, basic binary categories for everything to fall into, that's how I'm using the words science and symbol. So, there's two categories, right? One category is things, objects, testable substances that we can interact with. And on the other side, symbol is a conceptual space, a space of meaning and of relationship and of projection as we interact with the world around us. So, to that end, I'm going to be using an article that I wrote, which I'll link in the description, and you can check out. You can follow along, or you can read it later, or instead of watching this. So, science and symbol inside you, the integration of mind and matter. We live in a conflict between worlds. So, we have a world that defines action, and we have a world that reveals meaning. So, with the active world, there are levers that we can pull. We can change things around us, right? And this is the scientific world, lines of action that we can follow that reveal cause and effect unfolding, spread out all around us, right? And the actions that we choose are based on a drive, an internal motivation to better ourselves. This is the other world. This is the root of feeling or sense. And these roots of feeling and sense rise up through branches of meaning, right? And the structure of experience is made of symbol in the way that I'm using that word. So we bring these things together in ourselves. So within us is the uniting of these two spaces, the world of signs and the world of stuff. They are united in you. there's a basic division between these two things, and we could call it a kind of fundamentalism or dogmatism, when people are devoted to one side or the other and they're not coming together properly. So for most people, I would say one of these worlds holds priority. So for someone who is very spiritually devoted, for example, that internal space of concept and sense of the world and experience of inner exploration can be more real than the arbitrary objects scattered around in the low material existence. And for someone who is a materialist, maybe an atheist even, the stuff that is in the world holds more valid truth. It's a more reliable reality than the feelings that are inside a person, which can't be observed objectively or measured the same using a gauge that can be passed from one person to another. It's subjective, it's within the subject, it's within the person, and so the material world is more real for them. And I've been stuck in both sides in my own life in the past. So the fundamentalism of materialism, where you break things down to their lowest component, I believed that, and I've also believed in the dogmas and the rationalization of gurus or conceptual speakers and teachers of that sort. So when I was young, I left the church, so the Christian Protestant denomination that I was going to, and I stepped into a world of debate on the internet, and I found conversations between atheists and creationists and I felt that the atheist arguments were persuasive and that their challenges were difficult to address within the frame that they were bringing them forward. And so I was persuaded into that. But I didn't realize that under every statement of fact and behind every line of logic within a materialist argument, there's a motivation there. That person has a desire. So that desire within the person is driving that argument. And so in a sense, it's more basic to their experience than the contents of the argument itself. And that inner demand for coherence, the person wants their experience to be coherent with the reality that they see. And so they reduce their perception so that the reality fits with their body and everything is on the same level and it all joins together and it seems to make sense within that way of looking at it. But that desire for things to make sense, that is not material. That's not something that a materialist can measure. So I discovered the realm of the metaphysical, so the philosophical space of the world beyond the material, which is maybe another way of saying spiritual, but it seems to be more acceptable to the materialist crowd when we use the word metaphysical or philosophical. Anyway, it has to do, having to do with the question why. So there's all this stuff and there's all this cause and effect, but what is the motive and what is the draw? Where's the connection, the relationship, the love, right? So the metaphysical ideas excited me. And as I was beginning to explore them, I fell into a kind of indefinite spirituality. So I began contemplating, I began meditating, and I applied myself to internal discovery, to opening and revealing my own experience to myself so that I could watch myself and realize that all of the processes playing out in my mind and my emotions were consequences of this deeper drive, and to identify with this deeper drive. And I also use psychoactive substances, plants, to push myself further into that experience. And ultimately, all told, over those years, I found a lot of meaning, a lot of intense personal validation of existence and spirituality and divinity, and it wasn't very useful because I couldn't share that. It's not something that I could distribute to people functionally. The space was exclusive. It was my own, and the relationships that I was in at the time, they couldn't participate in that space within me. I had to be able to carry it out and make it real in the world. And so things drifted apart. To the perspective of other people, my pursuit wasn't valid. There was no way for them to recognize it. So ultimately, on whatever side, a commitment that's not balanced will fail. Devotion, it becomes meaningless on one side if it's just arbitrary physical interaction, and it becomes unreal on the other side if it has no physical expression. So the truth of the physical world and of the scientific process is in how my motivation and desire and my sense of my own being, how that can connect to the world through these material processes. The material world, the material is real as it is experienced. And the truth of the spiritual world is in how it has a material expression. So the ideas are real when they can be embodied and practiced. And so I had to learn to bring these two things together within myself. And that's something that we all have to do. if we want to be balanced and if we want to be purposeful and useful. And it's challenging because we tend to get stuck. So we struggle against ourselves, and we can suffer from visions of the world that don't show up in our life. We can have a picture of how things should be or how things are on a certain level, but the way that our life is playing out might not match that picture. And so there's a dissonance, and there's a conflict between the world that I envision and the world that I inhabit. And that's a problem. That's a serious problem, right? And we also fight when we are stuck in a life that doesn't fit into a mental model. So we can have a physical priority and we can be doing things, but we can have a hard time resolving what we're doing with how we're feeling about it and how it fits together and how it informs our relationships. And so there's a lack of fit between the material and the model and me. And the solution is in me. It's in you, right? It's up to us to take these dissonant realities and refine our relationship towards them so that we can conduct them into one another, right? And then we have meaning, and then we have coherence. So we can do that. When our head is in the clouds, we can get grounded again. And when we're stuck in the mundane, we can find inspiration, and we can look towards the other mode and be drawn forward. It's like if you're trying to walk and you're pushing your left foot forward, and you're going forward and you're making progress and you're making progress. There's only so far that you can push in that left mode. There's only so far that you can push an idea, right? Until it needs to be applied. And then going into the application and into the physical practice, that's like picking up your right foot, and suddenly now we can step forward and have this progress that we couldn't have when we were trying to just walk with one foot. So if you're lost in daydreams and you're frustrated with a physically empty life, right, then that's it, stuck in a symbolic mode, in a conceptual space, right? Or if we're stuck in a routine and we're toiling in some mechanical role, some doing things that we don't care about, then we're stuck in the scientific or in the physical mode. So if we're really invested, right, in a symbolic mode, we can have a sense of profound meaning, but not be able to express it, not be able to do it, to apply it to the things in our life, to our work and to our play, to our rituals, right, to our educational processes. So then it's not valid, right? It needs to be validated in practice. And if we're very good at a skill, but the skill is nonsensical and it doesn't attach to any meaning, then there's no enrichment there. You can be really fast at doing something that is totally arbitrary and not embedded in a serviceable pattern that's enriching people's lives. And it's just mechanics at that point. It's death. It's not alive because it's not purposeful. So the solution to either of these problems is to move towards where the lack is, to press into where the pain is coming from. So we can test applications of our ideas, and we can look for purpose for our uninspired behavior. So when our life feels kind of empty and the day-to-day isn't fulfilling, then we need something like prayer, right? Like a slave toiling in labor to enrich their master. The meaning is far away, and we can look up to a higher thing, find something transcendental to draw us up from that pit. Call to God, search within yourself and find where the ache is coming from. There's a barrier that's keeping us from reaching towards love. And changing our habits and adding routines, it's not going to resolve the dysfunction, because that is a continuation of the same mode. It's if I do another thing, if I do a different thing, well, the problem is that the things that you're doing are not bringing joy. And so we need to connect to a source of joy to be able to have the things that we do be meaningful, right? Like and on the other side, when the world seems disconnected from us and we don't have a direction and we are kind of floating, we need to pick something to do. So like an exile who's wandering around from place to place, they have nothing to build. There's no purpose, there's no service, right? We should look for something basic and find some instruction to follow. We look around at and identify practical needs, and then find a way to contribute to that need, right? To meet it, to give the person some food, or to clean up something, or to interact and give an opportunity for a relationship. We need to do the thing, right? So we're constantly balancing by moving from one of these modes into the other, right? So if we stay in one mode or the other for too long, then we lose a living dynamic. Being locked on one side, it becomes an extreme and you sink into it over time and get stuck, right? So then the balance is lost. It's in the tension between the modes, between the idea and the enactment, right? It's in that tension of switching between them that we bring them together, right? That's what a walk is. It's the one foot, then the other foot, and they're held together by tension. If we let the tension go, then we lose balance and the body falls over, it tips, right? So we can't split our attention. We can't live in both modes in a focused manner. We're focusing more towards one or the other, and in moving between them, then we balance it out through that tension. So we refer to what our purpose is, and then we act. We confirm what our goal is, and then we apply practice towards reaching that goal. We can test a process, and then we can discern the pattern that's in the process. Learn a skill, and then imagine how to apply the skill. So we're going back and forth, right? And through our bodies, through the scientific mode, the physical, the embodied, the measurable, we can shape our environment, right? And through our souls, we transcend it. And we as humans have a unique ability to discover transcendence. We carry it into the world through loving service. So we shape our environment, we transcend our environment. So we're not subject internally to the pressures that are coming in. We choose how to respond, and we can see a bigger picture. And when we see the bigger picture, then we can act more appropriately according to the situation that we're in, right? We can be more effective that way. So we aim for the best over the longest term. And this will reveal to us the best way of doing, right? Pursuing a right action, right, and doing things well will prepare us for divine insight to be able to recognize the best aim. And so they inform one another, right? And recognizing the value of material knowledge, I mean, it's very obvious that that's helpful. You don't have to look very far to see the gifts of science, right? So it's empowered us on a grand scale. Our actions have far-reaching implications because of the leverage that we've been afforded through technology. And the physical opportunities that we enjoy are immense. But also, understanding the beauty of novel concepts is wonderful, right? Insight and creativity that we receive from unending humanity enriches our life and inspires us. We're blessed with the glory of deep truths and beauty, right? And it's natural to have a preference for one side or the other, and it's okay to be more intuitively drawn to one or the other, but we need to be intentional about recognizing and directing ourselves according to that which is not our inclination, to be able to move back and forth between them. Because every time we re-enter our preferred mode, it's a renewal, and it's different than it was before. And then every time we apply something again after reconsidering, it's like doing it new. So it's a renewal that we go through, and if we get stuck in one and then we never re-enter that mode, we're just stay where we are according to that mode, then it's death. We're not moving anymore. So specialization within one or the other gives us concentrated leverage. In general, specialization gives us freedom of action within a domain of mastery, right? But we're in danger when you try to totalize what we specialize, right? So competence within a narrow field or within a specific mode can give us a delusion of competence across fields or across modes, right? So we get really good at something and then we think we're good at other things as well because we're good at this thing, but we haven't done them or we're not doing them, right? So special ability then can become a container for general ability. It can try to fit general competence within its specialty. But this is upside down. This is backwards, right? The general is broader, obviously, and the specific is an instance of the general. So how this applies to what I'm talking about is that a spiritually minded person can say that all action in matter is a mere expression of spirit, right? So claiming that the spirit is what's primary and more real, and therefore all I need to do is refine myself spiritually, and then the material world will become what I want it to be without exerting material effort. It's not true. And a scientist can claim that all inner states that a person experiences, right? If someone wants to be really reductive, they can say that all of those are just a demonstration of a chemical reality. So it's hormones and it's neurons and it's whatever. It just happens to be interacting the way that it is. All the things are bumping into each other and the person thinks they feel this way, but really it's just stuff. But that's not true either, because obviously we value ourselves. So the inner world cannot contain and dominate the outer world, and the material world cannot master and dictate to the spiritual. They need to not be competing for dominance, but to submit to one another. Like any good relationship, humility, right, and softness allows for bridging into one another. And we conduct this within ourselves. We conduct the material world into the spiritual world as we find the meaning. We find the meaning in our actions, right? And we find the expression of our desires, right? So that's a coherent reality. The complementary exchange between spirit, which is motive, vision, and pattern, and between matter, which is stuff and things and instantiation. And this is the relationship between heaven and earth. If we think of the symbolic as the heavenly and the material as the earthly, then life is a band that undulates between the realms of heaven and earth, right? And that's where we are. We're living, if we're living. So if we're not dead inside ourselves. And there's so much of ourselves that is not discovered. There's so much of the world that is not known, right? The measure that we use is not infinite. Our tools and our ideas are limited by our perception and our experiences. So we're all condemned to trust. Whether we choose to trust more our physical senses or choose to trust more our emotions or intuitions, right? We're using some standard of judgment. We must act in the world and we must assess the world in order to act, right? So we commit not because of certainty, but because of necessity. In order to go on living, I have to do something, so I have to decide that this is what this thing is, and I have to decide this is what this feeling is, and I don't know, I can't judge them totally, right? But I get an idea, and as I see those things interacting with each other and I feel the consequences in my life, I learn, hopefully, and then I have good teachers and on, but we're always trusting our interpretation of responses, and we're trusting the people who are teaching us, and we're trusting reality, and we're trusting our inner world. And we have an incomplete picture, but we move forward to the best of our ability, and we act according to the best of our judgment. And this is our belief. This is belief. We're all believers. We all require some manner of basic trust to frame our reality and to move in it. And we prove our belief when our picture of reality aligns through our actions with good results. When we apply a theory successfully, we strengthen the theory. When we practice a skill joyfully, we improve our skill. And failure and pain, they chip away at falsehoods, false impressions of reality that get corrected when the theory cannot be applied and when the skill cannot be practiced properly. And so this chips away at fruitlessness and leaves something more true. And if we accept that, if we accept the remodeling of ourselves and continue one foot after the other, moving forward, then we align with the truth. Now, as we iterate, as we continue to go through more instances of a thing and practice it and try to do it better and recognize what's happening and try to do it better and see the results and try to do it better, we improve, right? Hopefully, if there's any wisdom, and we find new ways of doing things and we realize new ways of seeing things, and our actions and our thoughts become more coherent and more effective, and we find better examples to follow. And as our experience and our insight, they dig out our ignorance and our assumptions, then there's more of a connection between our understanding and reality itself, right? And reality is consistent. It's reliable. It always upholds its end of existence. And as we conform to the demands of the world and its creator, we find our peace and our purpose. It is our opportunity and our duty to realize the truth, to realize it in our minds, to recognize it, and to realize it with our hands, to make it real. Realize. The world is a place of wonder and also sensibility. So it makes sense. There are persistent patterns that apply across domains and through any scale. And the use of symbol is in revealing and instilling those patterns. And creation is made of stuff, which is physical and actual. There's material that inhabits any object of perception. Science equips us to define, right, and leverage the stuff. And the task of humanity is bridging that material with that pattern. And our role is to dedicate form to inspired purpose. And that includes dedicating ourselves, right, to what inspires us. And through the specifying power of tools and the generalizing influence of stories, we dominate the world. This is our domain. You have a unique filter. You hold a special capacity to do this, to manifest truth according to your style, right? And your idiosyncrasy and your gifting and balancing of ability, and the symbol and the science are consistent, right? The material world and the conceptual world exist reliably, and there's a miracle with how they meet in you. And it's up to you to submit to that and to conduct that and to reveal that to reality so that we can experience through relationship with you the unique manifestations of that gift. Rest in harmony with the pattern. Apply your tools responsibly. Truth confirms truth, and let it flow. Thank you for watching. If this has been interesting or informative, do check out the newsletter. Like, subscribe, support, leave a comment if there's things that are unclear, things that you disagree with, things that you find interesting. Please let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.